There are many decisions that a cinematographer and director make that affect the appearance of a movie. These decisions impact the audience's experience and the way the story is being told. Some techniques are subtle and make for excellent storytelling by making the audience fall in love, care, feel suspense, be afraid or nervous, and be drawn in without knowing how it's happening. Some techniques are so innovative or eye-catching that the movie becomes as much about the visuals as the story. What follows is a brief tutorial on a number of techniques that can be applied just through the decisions made in operating a camera. One of the primary tools at the disposal of a camera operator is exposure. Exposure is defined as how light or dark the image appears in camera. A normal exposure will have a good distribution of light to dark values and seem natural to the eyes. An overexposed image can be used to give a dreamy or hot appearance to a shot. An underexposed image can give the appearance of darkness and even the illusion of night. Exposure is controlled in camera by three settings known together as the exposure triangle. The exposure triangle consists of aperture, the size of the opening in the camera lens, shutter speed, the length of time the shutter remains open while capturing an image, and ISO, the setting that controls how sensitive the image sensor is to light. Each of these will have an effect on the appearance of the photos or videos shot. Aperture controls depth of field. A high aperture number like 16 means the aperture is not open very wide and is letting very little light in. This will create a large depth of field where more things are in focus. This is useful when you are trying to keep movements, characters, and other things in focus, and works great for scenes where the scenery is important to the shot. This setting is hard to maintain in low light situations due to the fact that it doesn't let very much light in. A low aperture number like 2.8 means the aperture is open very wide and is letting in lots of light. This setting will create a shallow depth of field. This setting is useful for focusing the viewer's attention on a single object within the scene. Techniques that are used frequently with shallow depth of field are the focus rack, which involves shifting the focus of the camera from one object to another, and the pole focus, which involves shifting the focus of the camera through the scene following a single moving object. Shallow depth of field is generally most effective with telephoto lenses and with objects that are closer to the camera. Shutter speed controls the blurring and freezing of motion. Since a video is always in motion, the effects of shutter speed can be subtle. Of primary concern is that the shutter speed can never drop below the frame rate at which the video is being recorded. Standard videos are recorded at 24 and 30 frames per second. Since video is recording one image in every frame, it makes sense that while shooting at 30 frames per second, the shutter speed cannot be slower than 1/30th of a second. However, the shutter speed can easily be faster. When the shutter speed is slow, the images that create the frames of the video will blur movement and make the movement look as we would expect, as you can see in this video of a fan shot at 1/30th of a second, and a frame rate of 30 frames per second. In this next video, the frame rate is 30 frames per second, but the shutter speed was increased to 1/1500th of a second. Since the shutter speed is fast, the individual photos that make up the video freeze the fan blade instead of blurring it, and so the resulting video shows the fan blades as opposed to being one continuously blurred object. ISO refers to the light sensitivity of the camera's image sensor. Adjusting the ISO can allow you to shoot in lower light situations and brighter situations. However, it is important to realize that the video is cleaner at lower ISOs, and as the ISO increases, more noise will begin to appear. High ISO noise is generally undesirable and decreases the quality of the video. Another area in which a cinematographer can make choices is in the focal length of the lens. Focal length choices affect what and how the viewer sees the subject in the background. In the following examples, we are comparing types of shots such as ultra-wide, wide, medium, close-up, and ultra-close-up. Each of these are shot with a different focal length lens to show the difference the camera lens choice can have on the shot. In ultra-wide and wide shots, the cinematographer is attempting to give a sense of context to the story. The where of the story is what is important. Wide-angle lenses are good at this because the cinematographer can stand at a relatively close distance to the subject and still get a large amount of the background in the frame. Also, wide-angle lenses push the background elements further away, making the scene seem more open and increasing the apparent distance between objects in a scene. While a more telephoto lens is not common for wide shots, the effect can create a different appearance as space is collapsed, making background elements seem larger and closer, and therefore simplifies the background by including less of it, and with a shallower depth of field. Medium and close-up shots are often shot with the standard lenses in the 50 to 85 mm range. These focal lengths match more closely the way the eye naturally perceives space. Shot with single focal length lenses with wide apertures, they also produce a fairly shallow depth of field. Telephoto lenses in this scenario help to simplify background elements even more and also tend to give a more flattering view of the actors. Wide-angle and fisheye lenses begin to show their distortion more at this distance. Ultra-close-up shots can be difficult because not all lenses can focus that close to the camera. However, these shots can give you a sense of emotion while not allowing the viewer to see what the actor is responding to. Each lens will give a different appearance. Fisheye and wide-angle will both have fairly pronounced distortion at this distance, while 50 to 85 mm lenses will appear fairly normal. Telephoto lenses will provide the actor with the most amount of space to move in, as the cinematographer will not have to stand quite as close. Composition is one of the most important elements a good cinematographer has within their control. Good composition eliminates distraction, focuses the viewer's attention on what is important, and sets the mood. Composition refers to what the cinematographer chooses to include in the frame and where they choose to put those elements. Simplifying is one of the most important guidelines of composition. As a technique, it eliminates all unnecessary details and makes for a very clean, uncluttered scene. Rule of thirds is a compositional guideline that helps the cinematographer to break away from the tendency to always center their subject. It works by dividing the viewing area into 3 equal columns and rows. Where those lines intersect is considered a good place to put your actors or other important elements in a scene. Horizon lines also work being placed on one of the thirds lines. When placing your subject in relation to the thirds, you should provide space for the subject to look into or move into. Lines are something that every good cinematographer should be aware of. Vertical lines, horizontal lines, diagonal lines, repeating lines, and leading lines are all tools at their disposal. When shooting horizontal or vertical lines, it is important to stand and shoot perpendicular to those lines so that they are not slightly off and therefore distracting. When shooting diagonal lines, they should be strong diagonals. Repeating lines, like repetition of anything, can create interest. Lastly, leading lines are used to direct the viewer's attention to what is important in the scene. Balance is a sense of visual equilibrium in your composition. Balance is achieved by distributing things that have visual weight equally. Symmetry is achieved when two objects of equal weight occupy similar positions on either side of a line of symmetry. Exact symmetry can have a striking visual effect. Approximate symmetry will feel comfortable. Asymmetrical balance occurs when subjects of different visual weight and quantity are placed on either side of an axis point. Asymmetrical balance can be difficult to achieve. Rule of thirds and occasionally triangles are used to help set up those types of shots. Eyeline is a technique by which you use the direction in which people are looking to control where the viewer's attention should be. Framing is the use of a foreground object as a natural frame to focus the viewer's attention on what is important. Dutch angle is a cinematography technique in which the camera is placed at a strong angle in relationship to the subject. Frame rate refers to how many individual pictures the camera records per second to create the motion on screen. Standard frame rates for video are 24 frames per second and 30 frames per second. Video shot at lower frame rates looks choppy. Video shot at higher frame rates is typically slowed down to a more standard frame rate to make slow motion video. The following are some examples of slowed down footage.